Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the first thing you probably thought when looking at the video title is, what? Final Fantasy XIV, John. Okay, what happened to Final Fantasies 1 through 13? Granted, folks, I'm aware a lot of people want me to start with, the Final Fantasy series. I went to it first because, 1990, like 2 or 3, that's when I popped my RPG cherry, in a manner of speaking, with Final Fantasy 4. Always a good time. But Square Enix has asked me to take a look at Final Fantasy 14, and I happily obliged because for a few months now, thanks to the person I actually have with me for this podcast review sort of thingamajig.
Hello.
Yeah, I've been interested in 14 because I've been hearing a lot of positive feedback from all over social media, other YouTube channels, and of course this man right here. Ladies and gentlemen, for this review slash podcast sort of experimental thing that I'm working on for the first time on this channel, I have Lewis from Brain Scratch Commentaries. When he Give yourself a round of applause there, Lewis.
I would, but I'm holding a microphone in one of my hands, so I guess I'll clap it against my wrist.
Yeah, they just give yourself like a little pat on the back there. Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, I brought Lewis from Brain Scratch Commentaries with me because he's actually the person that told me the most of Final Fantasy XIV since the game was originally released in 2010. Just to give a little backstory for Final Fantasy XIV, in 2010 it saw release and it could have been a lot better than what it initially was. So Square Enix took that to heart. Like, they really did, because they felt it damaged the brand, like the imaging of Final Fantasy XIV. I think that's a little overly critical, but whatever. They took the game, they reworked it, and hence now we have a Realm Reborn, which is pretty much a reworked Final Fantasy XIV, and that's the subject of what this review slash podcast is going to be. So, with that said, I brought Lewis here for a reason, because Lewis, like, go into like how you were introduced to Final Fantasy XIV.
Final Fantasy XIV was something that I was interested in for quite a long time. My brother played it like a year or so before I got into it. I actually just sort of happened upon the 14-day free trial that they've got going. So I tried that out and got hooked, but I've always been trying to get into MMORPGs. The main problem at the time was that my PC couldn't handle most of them. It even had some trouble with World of Warcraft, which should tell you how bad it was at the time. Oh, but after I got into it, we got the offer for the Brain Scratch promotion, and since I was already playing it and loving it, I had absolutely no problem. At this point, as well, selling my soul is a bit of a formality, because Steam tells me I've got 599 hours on the game, just counting Steam itself and not my console time. 599 is an annoying number, by the way.
Dude, play one more hour. Just go for the well-rounded 600. Like, what are you doing?
So I'm really into the game now. I've actually gotten a good distance into HEAVENSWARD, and that's something that you have to play through the game. You have to play through the entire core game to get to.
Maybe I haven't said it enough here on this channel specifically, but I think I've said it plenty of times on SGB or Brain Scratch that I'm always very hesitant on approaching an MMO, a massively multiplayer online game, because it always looked like the sort of genre where there was so much to do, so much to see. I just didn't think I can get into that without losing my mind. But I wanted to give it a shot with Final Fantasy XIV because, again, of all the positive press I've been hearing, and well, I have decided to finally give it a shot, and what I think about is pretty much the entire point of this video. So without further ado, I guess we should start with like the basic premise of Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn. Like, you start as an adventurer, and you have a choice of a lot of different classes, and well, not so much classes, but you can choose. You're pretty much your race and the gender of your race, and you have a lot of customization options from the get-go. And I was like for the first half hour, as Lewis can tell you, I was just rummaging around with character sizes and builds, so I finally decided to just settle on
Lalafell.
The Lalafell. There you go.
Yes.
Yeah, see. Can I just say right now, right off the top of my head, I'm still at a point in time where I'm still trying to learn all the damn names of all these characters, because 14 is very into its lore, giving all these characters very J.R. Tolkien-like names and premises, and it's a lot to absorb at first, but it's not as complicated as I'm making it sound. It's just, the names are not your typical Bob or Aerith or Cloud or Squall.
Or Snow or Hope or Lightning.
Yeah, I like it when they were based off weather patterns.
Yes, the MMORPG games in the series have always had really fleshed out lore, and that's almost a must for MMORPGs. I mean, there's the stereotype about MMO players where they don't really read the stuff, but that's only part of the player base for any given game. Even in World of Warcraft, you're going to have a lot of players who genuinely care about the world and want to learn more about it, and they're actually going to read the dialogue when they do the side quests rather than just moving forward as fast as they can. And I'm one of those players.
What is going on inside the world of Final Fantasy XIV? Well, this place has a name, by the way. Was it Eorzea, right?
Eorzea, yeah. And Eorzea is just the name of the continent you're on. The actual planet is called Hydaelyn, which is also the name of the mother crystal that blesses you with the warrior light's power, you know. But the story of Final Fantasy XIV is a bit of a trip, because there was an entire game before A Realm Reborn. The original run of Final Fantasy XIV actually takes place a good 5 years before this game began, and that has its own entire plot line and all of its side quests and all that. It's worth looking it all up on YouTube. Normally I wouldn't advise that, but you can't actually play the original Final Fantasy XIV anymore.
Yeah, Realm Reborn is what you're getting from the start now, because you know, in a way, with the opening cinematic, you can kind of see what happened to the original Final Fantasy XIV world. It gets blown to hell thanks to Bahamut.
Yeah,
and it's quite a spectacular spectacle. You know, it's like, wow, a lot of people died, but it sure looks pretty. And I can say that right now, just on that little segue. This game looks great. I've ran it on the highest settings on my PC. My rig is pretty powerful, 1080p, DirectX 11, and I was just astonished by the graphical quality, the way everything looks. The lighting in this game alone is really captivated me. And I was like, wow, this looks spectacular, and I really want to see where else. If I'm just getting dazzled just by looking at a tree, like what's a cavern gonna look like, or what about a sandy dunes?
One of the things that I should mention about A Realm Reborn as opposed to its original, just in case any of our viewers played the original but haven't given A Realm Reborn a chance, is that graphically, maybe certain aspects of the graphics aren't as good, but the environment design is a lot better than it used to be. Final Fantasy XIV, the original version, had a lot of wide open areas with copy-pasted scenery. A Realm Reborn and Heavensward, even, including Heavensward's much larger areas, does not do that. Everything has its own distinct identity, and there's always another landmark. Like, it's one of those games that has a mini-map, but if you've been around for, even just a little bit, you probably won't get lost, because you'll be able to tell where you're going just by sight.
Not to mention, fast traveling around the entire world, or just like the entire continent, I should say, is it's remarkably easy. Because of all the etherites.
Yeah.
These little crystal thingies that pretty much act as quick transports. And I get that some things that I may talk about are common sense to fellow MMO players, but you got to realize this is also my first time getting into an MMO. I got to say, I'm jumping the gun a bit here. I really did enjoy my time. An MMO from the get-go is something I don't think you should play by yourself. You know, it's called massively multiplayer online. And it's not just because you're connected to a lot of other people all around the world, but I also think it's important to build friendships or invite friends over to this. And that's one of the reasons why I invited Lewis to this, is because I know he could show me the ropes, and he did. In fact, I would say he even carried me in the first 5 hours. I had to wane off the breasts after a while, but I'm a full-fledged MMO player now, thanks to Lewis. Yeah. Thanks, Mama Lewis.
Yeah, massive respect. You did more than I did when I started out. Like, I would not have touched a tanking class as my first class, and I would not have tried playing with a keyboard when I had the gamepad option there. Yeah. But you did both.
Speaking of classes, yeah, that is the first class I did choose. I chose Marauder because I'm always about, when starting off, I'm always about the class that can hit hard. Not so much with magic spells or buffs or debuffs or status effects and all that other stuff. It was more like, how hard can I hit this person in the face? And Marauder just spoke to me in that regard. I know it's a little deceiving considering my race, but don't make no mistake. My character, Naomi Gambiani, will mess you up hard. Yeah, there's the name of my character. The character's origin is based off of a fanfic that I wrote years ago, and it started as a self-insert fanfic. I'm pretty sure all of us have made at least 3 of those. But by the third story, I decided to add more original characters, and Naomi is the one I'm proudest of. So I stick her in things that I can, and it just flesh her out in all sorts of other games.
Yeah, I do something similar with certain characters in my own games, but...
What class did you originally start with your character?
The character actually started as a marauder, but as you saw when we were playing together, I barely leveled it up at all.
Yeah.
Because what I was actually trying to be was a rogue. Rogue classes are awesome, and you can't actually start as a rogue in this game. You have to find the Rogues Guild in-game yourself, which the story provides a pretty good explanation for why you need to do that, but the reason for that is they didn't actually include Rogue class when the game launched. It was a class that was added in a later patch.
And speaking of how the story introduces you to that class, so what is the primary goal of the adventurer in Final Fantasy XIV?
Well, at first you don't really start with one. You're an adventurer who comes to Eorzea from another country. Exactly where or why is up to you to decide. In fact, on the social site that they have, the Lodestone, there's even a space on your character slot where you can type in a backstory if you so choose. But as you progress in the story, once you get to a certain point, you join an organization called the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. And what this group is actually a combination of two groups from the original game. The Circle of Knowing, which was led by the bearded wizard guy from the CG intro, Louis Lavaliere, and a woman named Minfilia, who was gathering people who were gifted by the Mother Crystal with a special blessing called the Echo.
Yeah.
And this group, their mandate is to protect Eorzea as a whole. All three nations, 3 plus 1 if you count the nation that doesn't want anything to do with the others, and
But we have to out of obligation.
yeah, that's pretty much how the plot goes. The main threat in Eorzea are these summoned entities, basically the summons from previous games, called primals. But rather than you summoning them to wreak horrible devastation against your enemies, the beast tribes of Eorzea summon them against the civilized peoples. And they're basically deities that feed off the faith of their believers and the crystals they offer, but rather than actually waiting for people to believe in them, they kidnap people and temper their souls and turn them into mindless slaves. I could go on and on forever about the intricacies of the primal plot, but Final Fantasy XIV, it actually has several significant layers to it as far as, what adversaries you're going to be dealing with during your adventures. Yeah, there's the primals, there's the Garlean Empire, which you haven't even gotten close to scratching the surface of, John. There's the Dragon Song War going on in Kurthus and Ishgard, which is built up to for a long time in the core game, and that's what the expansion pack deals with primarily. Besides that, you've got the internal political situation in Ul'dah, and all this other stuff going on in the other two countries, like the pirates who don't really appreciate being civilized in Limsa Lominsa. There's always something new going wrong.
Pirates, damn it. This is running civilized pirates. What is this?
There's a lot going on, but there's never a point in the game where it doesn't feel like the game has a plot and is trying to move forward.
Well, I mean, like, it's an MMO. I focused on the multiplayer aspect of it earlier. There's also the other M of that acronym that's massively. This game is huge, and you have 599 hours. That's going to be a sticking point for me until you get that extra hour. You have nearly 600 hours of game time into this, and you're still doing things.
Yeah.
And I put about, let's see, my Steam counter on the page says 25. Like, I'm pretty sure we did more than that during this week. And I left the game idle for a few times, like just sitting down and letting my MP, TP, and HP recharge. Every once in a while, I just do random sit-downs, sit in a bar when I'm not eating anything. And as me and Lewis will attest to, dancing in random spots. Because we have the time to kill, we can do that. That's the kind of thing you can do when you're together with a team. We even danced in the 7th Circle of Hell, as the footage will attest to you. That was a good time. I really did like that. In terms of the scope of Final Fantasy XIV, there are many things to do, and it may seem overwhelming at first, which is the thing that worried me the most when starting here, but it's actually pretty simple. You have a selection of side quests to do from the get-go, but Final Fantasy XIV is actually pretty good at guiding you to where you need to go while keeping it simple so that it's easier to absorb.
Yeah.
The hardest thing I have about Final Fantasy XIV is just, learning the names of all of these locations. It's not so much what I need to do or what I need or who I have to see. It's just memorizing some names here and there. But 14 is equipped with all sorts of things to let you know what you should be doing now, like the recommendations tab. that's a lifesaver like an MMO because okay, I should probably do this now. But that's just talking about what's going on like within towns and other places of interest. Outside is where all the action really happens, and I guess we like fates for one thing. The fates, these are this is an acronym for
full active time events. What these are basically, they're dynamic events that occur at regular intervals out in the field, signified by blue area of effect circles on your map. They could range anything from kill all the mooks, to protect these objects, to protect this person while they're trying to get to another place, to fighting a boss monster, a notorious monster. A lot of them return from Final Fantasy XI, if anyone is a fan of that. I think there's a crab hanging around near Vesper Bay called Bubbling Bernie or something along those lines.
Bernie.
I only ever ran into one notorious monster at Final Fantasy XI, and I killed it before I even realized it was a notorious monster. I was like, why is this lizard taking so many hits to kill? And then I noticed his name was Leaping Lizzie, and then it died.
What Lewis was saying is sometimes fate encounters where you run into boss versions of regular sword fodder, and mine was I think his name was Menuous. It was pretty much a giant version of wounded Aurochs. So these are normally docile creatures until you like go to their nest and suddenly they get all tough, and you run into this guy and you see why, and I was like, oh, okay, it's probably not just a bad. Oh my god, this thing is huge, and I to this day still have not taken care of it because with some fates. There could be times where you are considered too powerful for it, and you have to, what this game calls level syncing. So if you're like level 22 and this is like a level 8 or 9 fate, you have to level sync so that you're back to that low level so that
you're not completely face rolling it and stealing all the credit from all the other players trying to do it.
I like face rolling.
Yeah, but the level syncing mechanic is actually pretty handy in this game, and our time together in the game is actually a good argument for why. Because when you're playing a game like World of Warcraft, you're stuck at whatever level you're at, and if you introduce a friend to it, well, you're at like level 60 and they're starting at level 1. For the sake of this example, please ignore the level up to 90 button that the expansion gives you. But when you're trying to help a friend get into it, you can do some of the content with them and level down so that you can play at their level and let them learn the ropes while helping them at the same time. Like, for example, I took my level 56 ninja character and did 3 dungeons and a boss with John and leveled myself down to like level 15 or so to do that. So I was able to stay in my comfort zone, but also be at the level where I could help without carrying the game myself, you know?
Oh, man, dungeon crawling. Like, do we want to open that can of worms? Because this is my first time doing something like this. This is where the MMO mentality comes into full effect.
And you started as a tank. Oh, God.
Let's explain that real quick. So in MMO terms, a tank is someone that is distracting all the enemies and taking all the attacks. While the healer does his part, the black mage or whatever other mage user is supplying the buffs and debuffs, while Lewis picks his nose and says, hey, you're not doing your job right. He's like, I know, I'm trying.
Yeah. Well, some single-player RPGs keep this, use this particular mechanic because, like, in the Dragon Age games or Xenoblade Chronicles, you'll have that one beefy character whose job it is to attract all the monsters' attention while the other characters wail on them from behind or the side. But in an MMORPG, where each player is controlling one character, the role is a lot more focused. And John had to do that for 3 straight dungeons in one sitting.
You had to have seen it, ladies and gentlemen. My hands were trembling. My heart was pounding because it's a lot of pressure. And this is not something like exclusive to Final Fantasy XIV. I'm not going to say Final Fantasy XIV made me crap my pants. No. It's just when you have to work together as a team, everyone's got to do their part, and my part was a very important one because my job was to make sure no one else got hurt. I'm making sure the enemies were solely focused on me, so that the mage, the healer, can do his job, and everyone else does their part well. And I was sweating buckets, for lack of a better description, so I can keep things PG. I gotta say, it was so invigorating. Afterwards, we destroyed the first few bosses. We got to Ifrit. it was remarkable. I mean, you got player commentations so that you can say, "Hey, you did a great job, buddy." Plundering treasure chests inside dungeons. It's very lucrative to go inside dungeons, treasure hunting to your heart's content.
The dungeons in this game are built to be replayable, so you can go through dungeons multiple times to get all the loot items possible. There's always a good number of dungeons to pick from at a given player level. Like, as soon as you hit level 15, you get 3 dungeons back to back that all unlock one after the other. And then you've got 3 big half-hour dungeons that you can go back to at any time, but you're also powering ahead through the story, unlocking bosses and more dungeons. The game is very content-heavy. What I'm trying to say. And you say, "Oh yeah, John," but you haven't seen the half of it.
I know, dude. I felt like I haven't seen an eighth of it. It's a very, very big game.
Yeah, it even maintains that once you get to end game. I mean, there's a lot of shit at the level 50 level that I haven't done yet, and I'm going through the level 51 to 60 stuff now. There are the raid dungeons. There's like 3 24-man dungeons at the Crystal Tower. And then there's, how much? 13 raid dungeons for Bahamut that are 8-man party ones. There's a long, long list of level 50 dungeons to play through. And then there are the super bosses, which you can access at any time you like once you've unlocked them from your Duty Finder menu. But my god, the coordination you need to pull off for some of these things with your party members is, well, I haven't beaten most of them yet. Oh, man.
It's like you're running a strictly super choreographed 8-ring circus when trying to take care of these guys. And can I just say, on that note, I guess if there was ever a low point for a dungeon, I would just say it's the initial wait, because when dungeon crawling, you have to use Duty Finder. To pretty much calling all cards to say, "Hey, I'm about to do a dungeon right now. I need a healer, and I need these other classes before I begin." And sometimes you don't immediately get an instant queue.
Yeah,
you have to wait a bit.
Yeah, it's worse when you're a DPS class, damage per second, if any of you don't know the lingo, because there aren't as many tanks and healers in the game as there are DPS classes. I guess a lot of players just prefer to be the ones dishing out the pain. Yeah, but the thing is, you can't just assemble a party before you go into the dungeon. But if you can't do that, the Duty Finder does let you pull in random party members to fill out the extra roles, and the Duty Finder does pull in players from other servers. So it's not just whatever the player climate on your server happens to be at that time. If you need more people, it will call in players from other servers.
And there's a lot of servers in the beginning. We went to the Diablo server in the beginning.
Yeah, there are a bunch of data centers, which are basically big groups of servers. The Chaos Data Center in particular is being moved to Europe right now, if anyone in Europe is interested in playing it, so keep an eye out for that particular one. It used to just be a North American server recommended for players in Europe, but now it's physically going to be in Europe, so pick that one if you want less latency.
But when all's said and done, you go through the fates, you go through dungeon crawling, treasure hunting, going through all the towns, you could repair equipment, buy new equipment, trade, plunder. Sometimes you just gotta sit back and relax. And I gotta say, there are a lot of callbacks to other Final Fantasies in this game, and I'm not just talking about soundtracks. I'm talking about places of interest. And I gotta say, one of the highlights for me during this mad dash to Ifrit was the Gold Saucer.
Oh, yes.
Oh my goodness. Man. I love the Gold Saucer. And Lewis was like, you gotta listen to the music. And I was like, I'm expecting a 7 remix. And yeah, we got a 7 remix. And
yeah. I really love the Gold Saucer because, for one thing, I haven't seen or heard of other MMORPGs really doing this kind of thing, where it's that sort of thing that you'd mostly see in a single player game, where you have this one side area that's just chock full of mini games and distractions. Whereas the rest of a typical MMO's content is focused on progress, like leveling up and getting more money or getting a battle currency or something, or some other special kind of token that you turn in for special items and whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas the Gold Saucer is its own thing off to the side. You have the triple triad minigame making its return from Final Fantasy VIII. It's a little hard. It's a little too hard, in my opinion, to get cards for that, because it took me a while to get as far in the game in the triple triad as I am, but I love triple triad, so I was willing to push forward for that. There's chocobo racing and chocobo breeding. John didn't really have time to sample that, and
if it's anything like 7, I don't think I'm gonna have time for a very long time.
yeah, there are some little mini games that you can play around the place too, just to get a few extra gold saucer points. But then the gold saucer also has its own fates called gates. Gold saucer active time events, which are just stupid little events that play like this mini game in the event square, where Typhon from Final Fantasy VI just does this red light green light game full of random AoE attacks that might blow you off the stage, and it's infuriating because it's entirely luck based, but you don't care because it's fucking Typhon. And then there's let's see, what other? Oh, there's a weekly lottery too, and I can never stop myself from going to see if I got if I won. I never do, but there's also a scratch-off lottery ticket that you can do every day. And somehow, when we were recording footage, I won the 10,000 MGP jackpot off the scratch-off 2 days in a row.
This week's coming up Millhouse.
And then I wasted it all on triple triad card booster packs.
And hookers.
No, on triple triad card booster packs, which is worse because I didn't even get the Zidane card I wanted.
It's like a hardcore Yu-Gi-Oh player. It's like I won all this tournament, but I blew it all booster packs. Yeah, we played around a triple triad together, which is really weird for me because I haven't played triple triad since my 68th attempt at Final Fantasy VIII.
Oh, you still beat me really easy.
Yeah, it was with the tournament pack, beginner's luck.
No, it was with the starting pack, and actually the starting pack is identical no matter what you do. The triple triad game in Final Fantasy XIV though is it's a lot more interesting than playing in Final Fantasy VIII, because in Final Fantasy VIII you were always playing against rock stupid NPCs, but now you can play against other players, kind of like the Tetramaster game that they used to have on Play Online, or maybe they still have it. I haven't seen it anywhere, but I know there used to be a multiplayer Tetramaster game.
I would like to see Tetramaster return from Final Fantasy IX because I have more memories with that game because, again, of how little I played 8 back then. Even though it's pretty much a watered-down version of Triple Triad. Yeah, the Gold Saucer is definitely a little slice of heaven. Hey, you know what else is a little slice of heaven? HEAVENSWARD. I see that segue I did there, kids. That's great. That's where all the big money from.
God. Oh, but the expansion. This is something that I'm going to have to talk about because John didn't have time to get even close to it. I didn't get even close to it when we did the Brain Scratch video either. It's like way late game, but don't let that discourage you from being interested, because everything leading up to it is awesome, especially the stuff deliberately leading into it. God damn, the finale of the core game was awesome. And I'd like to say more, but that's probably too spoilery for this video. So I'm just gonna say that the HEAVENSWARD expansion opens up the nation, the city-state of Ishgard, which the core game has been building up to since, I believe, the original Final Fantasy XIV, so it took long enough to get inside the damn city. But there's this one particularly uncooperative part of the world called Kurthus, and you get to explore one region of this snowy wasteland during the main game. And the people there are jerks. They're religious assholes who don't like anyone who doesn't believe in their religion, unless you help them, and then they're your best friend. So when the rest of the world is against you, the one you helped, who became your best friend, lets you into the city, and it's all uphill from there, like literally, because part of this HEAVENSWARD is this floating sea of clouds. There's just a bunch of floating islands, and it's really pretty and has the best music I've heard in the game so far. And that is the prettiest part of HEAVENSWARD. But there's also more snowy wasteland, and my god, this is when you realize Heavensward is a lot bigger and a lot more open than the main game. Like, seriously, whoa, I can't wait until I can fly through this, because there's a lot of it, and a lot of really strong monsters to fight, and the story is really good. I wish I could, like,
I think at some point I'm waiting for Lewis to climax around the middle of this exclusive.
I'm just, I don't want to say too much about Heavensward's story, because I'm not sure how much I can say without spoiling what happens in the main game.
Yeah, well, it definitely sounds like you can get your money's worth with Heavensward. I had the expansion, but obviously I'm not going to get any use out of it until I finish my playthrough of Realm Reborn, and that is something that's definitely going to happen because, ladies and gentlemen, I can say as someone who has never played an MMO in his or her life, I'm pretty sure I'm a guy, as a guy who has never finished an MMO, as a person who for the longest time was scared, I guess I can just say that right there, scared of trying to get into one. My friends that play World of Warcraft, League of Legends, all that kind of stuff. Final Fantasy XIV, I think, is a fantastic way to get yourself into the genre. It's very user-friendly with its interfaces. There's always something to do. The game always gives you something to do. Whether you're going for one of the many side quests, monster hunting logs, crafting, building up classes. You don't want to be a marauder, you could be an arcanist or a black mage or a monk at some point or another. The gold saucer, battles up the wazoo, dungeon crawling, treasure hunting. It's all there, and it's a great time when you have a lot of friends on your side, because again, it's that kind of game. You pretty much, that's a prerequisite. So if you're at all interested, folks, there's many ways you can get 14 nowadays, isn't there?
Yeah, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, PC. There's a 14-day free trial on all of them. See what they did there. 14. It's kind of like the 13 days in Final Fantasy 13. Only is 14 days. And
yeah, don't ask about the Final Fantasy 1 trial. It's only a day. But yeah, there you have it, folks. You can find pretty much all the information you need to know in the description below. As always, I recommend it. Lewis, 599-hour man, I'm sure recommends it. We got a few people on Brain Scratch getting ready to play this game. We're thinking of doing something in the upcoming months, and I may start live streaming this because I just got a feeling I could run into a lot more people that way. Maybe make a few friends. You never know with this kind of game, but that's kind of the point of MMOs, to broaden your taste, broaden your horizons, and experience new things and adventures to see. So, with all that said, folks, that was the Final Fantasy XIV podcast review, sort of experimental thingamajig. It's first time I'm really doing something like this, but I figured it was appropriate because, again, this is a really big game, so I couldn't write a script for this sort of thing without it being like 3 to 4 hours long. And I'm talking as the guy that did a 50-something minute Sonic 06 review. I can't cover Final Fantasy XIV in a written script, with how thorough I'd like to get. It's just not possible. So I hoped we've given you guys enough to garner some sort of interest, because I think it is worth your time and money. So with that said, thank you guys for watching. Lewis, thanks again for joining me for today's video. Good sir.
Glad to be here.
Okay, no, you're not. You fucking liar. Like, what do I get paid? You'll get it when you leave.
Hi, I'm Daisy. Yeah. Should I have said that instead?
Yeah, there you go. Just hi, I'm Daisy. Anyway, folks, thank you all for watching. You have yourselves a fantastic night, and take care.